You and I know the most dangerous mistake in business. But that morning, Whitmore Global's 42nd floor boardroom held a silence only massive wealth and absolute fear create. Morning lights sliced through, striking the massive walnut conference table perfectly, hitting pristine water glasses and rows of shut-down computers, and illuminating 4 overseas partners, flown in just to sign a $400 million corporate merger. Standing at the head of it all was 28-year-old Astrid Whitmore, the acting chief executive. Her father's name branded the very building they occupied. Wearing a sharp black dress, she paced the room. Her expensive heels struck the floor, delivering small verdicts with every single step. Dark hair over one shoulder, her tone completely controlled. She had the most ruthless gaze of any corporate executive there. Down at the opposite end sat 29-year-old Finn Corbin, the quietest guy there. Rumpled dress shirt, sleeves pushed up, just a single thin file resting before him. Just a basic risk analyst, far from a senior executive. Nobody even bothered introducing him to the overseas partners. Outside the boardroom's glass, his 6-year-old daughter Callista sat alone, squeezing her small knees tightly together, clutching a ragged stuffed bunny to her chest, just waiting for her dad to return. Finn had just informed the entire room, speaking incredibly calmly, that a specific disruption clause hidden inside the contract addendum could drain over $700 million from Whitmore Global if multiple shipping ports failed during one financial quarter. Astrid stared at him, projecting the tired patience of a CEO dismissing total corporate nonsense. She leaned back, flashing a completely ice-cold smile, and whispered a quiet threat that only the closest executives could actually catch. "Try me again, I dare you." 10 minutes from now, she'd be totally speechless. Let's look back together. Hours earlier, before that boardroom opened and the city skyline remained dark, the quiet analyst sat on a cramped twin bed in his modest apartment, simply listening to his little girl breathe. Callista had been awake, hacking terribly since just after 2 in the morning. He spent that brutal hour from 2 until 3 pressing a gentle hand against her spine, tracking the exact seconds between each tiny rattle. Once her chest finally calmed down, the morning sky was turning pale. The apartment complex started rumbling to life, and Finn never went back to sleep. His mobile phone alarm buzzed at 5:45. He killed the screen before it chimed twice. He crept around. That silent glide parents master when keeping a sick kid asleep is their highest priority. Out in the kitchen, he whipped up 2 eggs and poured some orange juice. Then he prepped the coffee machine, delaying his own morning cup for now. Caffeine was a personal reward earned only once her school lunch was fully packed. He fired up his work computer on the counter, checking emails while breakfast cooked. Whitmore's corporate lawyer Leon Hawthorne had just rubber-stamped that messy multi-port logistics contract. Finn studied the approval twice. He flagged huge financial risks in that clause 3 days ago. Management gave him nothing but a generic reply. Now with one lazy stroke, legal buried his risk analysis under useless paperwork. Finn shut the lid. Quiet guys like him always wait to see the entire board. At 6:20, his screen lit up with an urgent school alert. A water pipe exploded at the Eastside Elementary campus overnight. They scrapped all classes for the entire day. You and I know life loves terrible timing. Finn read it standing at the sink. He didn't smash a plate, he didn't even swear. Let's unpack this together. Finn just stared at the message, then his packed corporate meeting calendar, and then at the narrow hallway leading down to his daughter Callista's bedroom. He had one crucial board meeting today. The senior partners had flown in. The massive corporate deal signing was at noon. He nervously dialed 3 numbers. The neighbor who usually watched Callista for an hour was away visiting family. The local daycare demanded 24 hours notice, plus a medical form from her pediatrician. Callista's grandmother lived 4 long states away. Finn placed his phone on the counter, standing completely silent until the coffee pot finished brewing. Then this quiet, overlooked guy did the only thing possible. He filled a small canvas backpack with colored pencils, a sketch pad, juice and crackers, an allergy inhaler, and her stuffed rabbit, because Callista absolutely refused to leave without it. By the time she wandered into the kitchen wearing her pajamas, rubbing one tired eye with her tiny fist, he had her clothes laid out, masking his quiet panic with a warm smile. "Morning, Bunny," he said gently. Quick change in plans, school is closed today. You are going to hang out with Dad for a little while. She stared back at him with that serious expression that always surprised him. Is it a big day at work? A little bit. I will be really quiet. I know you will, he whispered, kneeling down to tie her tiny sneakers. Hot chocolate if you are. She paused, quietly considering his offer for a moment. She nodded once like a CEO accepting contract terms and went to grab her rabbit. The commute into the financial district was totally normal, until it suddenly wasn't. While Callista hummed a song, Finn checked his mirrors 3 times more than any driver needed to. He ignored the massive merger deal. He blocked out that highly risky financial addendum. His mind was on her inhaler and that crucial doctor appointment he had already postponed twice. And the rent payment that would automatically hit his bank account this Friday. These hidden pressures made him such a sharp, quiet observer. Quiet guys notice everything. He couldn't afford a bad decision, not any week. He parked beneath Whitmore Global headquarters at exactly 7:51. He lifted Callista from her car seat, slinging her little backpack over his shoulder. Then walked her to the executive visitor lounge, a sleek glass room meant for corporate guests. He settled her into a leather chair by the window, with her sketch pad and juice. He pointed out the receptionist, Nora, who beamed at Callista as if she had been eagerly waiting her entire morning shift just to see her. I need you to stay right here, Finn told her gently. If you need anything, tell Miss Nora. If you need me, tell her to find me. I will come back and check on you, and we can have lunch together. Can you do this for Dad? Callista nodded back, solemn as a judge. She lifted her stuffed rabbit slightly. We will wait. He kissed her head and headed toward his unnoticed, quiet cubicle. He completely missed arrogant CEO Astrid Whitmore, watching from behind her frosted glass office door. Observing this tiny girl in sneakers and a blue knit cardigan, holding a stuffed rabbit, looking out the glass as if she had done this 100 times before. Stick with me here. Astrid slept 4 hours, memorizing the massive due diligence agenda perfectly. Her billionaire father, George Whitmore, had warned her 2 weeks ago that forcing this deal through would prove to the board she could run the entire company alone. You and I know she wouldn't let that remark fade. But she completely missed a kid in the waiting area, wearing a messy, wrinkled shirt, and a quiet junior analyst who refused to just sign and step aside. Turning from the window, she saw Clinton Mercer already in the doorway, balancing 2 coffees and a thick folder under one arm. Clinton was 45, sporting perfect silver hair. His silk tie always looked slightly more expensive than it actually needed to be. He served as the firm's chief strategy officer, and he'd been coasting at Whitmore Global for nearly 10 years longer than Astrid ever held any real corporate power. He flashed that usual fake smile of his, all teeth, totally dead eyes. The operations team wants to play cute this morning, he said with a smirk. I'm hearing Corbin is demanding another meeting about the addendum. He already had one, Astrid replied. Legal signed off. It is honestly bizarre. Strange how? Clinton dropped the coffee down and took a slow breath. He's a cautious guy, sure, but he came up through field operations. He spots worst-case disasters the same way you and I notice rain clouds. Great for loading cargo ships. Terrible when you're trying to close a massive financial deal with executives who flew halfway across the planet to sign. He peered right through the glass toward the corporate lounge. I actually noticed he brought his daughter with him today. I sure hope everything is okay at home. Astrid followed his gaze. That quiet little girl with the rabbit was busy drawing, her tiny tongue poking through her teeth in deep concentration. Astrid spun back to her monitor. Put that addendum on my desk. I'll review it before 10. Already on your desk, Clinton smirked, walking away. Meanwhile, in his quiet cubicle, Finn already had the legal folder open. He placed 2 contract versions side by side, carefully cross-referencing them against the corporate file system's detailed version history. What the quiet guy found was painfully exact. The older clause forced both companies to share financial risk for port disruptions on a fair sliding scale, with thresholds that triggered open or closed, depending on how severe the disaster got. This new edit completely deleted that safety net, replacing it with a flat waterfall structure, where Whitmore Global would eat the heaviest losses of any multi-port crash regardless of cause. If one port jammed up, the risk was manageable. But if 2 or 3 froze at once, like they frequently did during bad Gulf storms or heavy labor strikes. This new language dragged the entire firm under that waterfall, drowning them in debt. He immediately checked the digital metadata. Someone saved this trap at 10:52 last night, way past closing time, using an executive account with top-level rights. Finn calmly opened his own outbox. He pulled up the memo he sent 3 days earlier, calling this exact clause a massive risk, specifically demanding a written response before the final draft ever reached the partners. Leon had answered with 2 pathetic words, "Noted, thanks." That was his entire response. They didn't make the contract safer. Someone intentionally made it so much worse. Finn didn't shout. The dangerous ones never do, no storming down halls. Instead, he exported the history, grabbed time-stamped screenshots, and dumped 3 devastating risk scenarios onto a tiny flash drive he kept ready for disasters exactly like this. Then he strolled over to the legal department and knocked on Leon Hawthorne's door. Leon was an old corporate player. He always preferred silent victories over loud, messy public battles. He glanced up from his monitor. Believe me, he wasn't smiling. "Finn, you cleared the addendum this morning." "I cleared what I was given." That multi-port language was altered late last night. "I flagged the original text 3 days ago." "Leon, I need to know if you understood those changes and exactly who demanded them." Leon adjusted his glasses, looking right past the quietest guy there. "We had pressure to simplify before the partners arrived. I was told the structure held." "Told by who? I was told." Leon stared at his screen. "Finn, I will be completely honest. If you want this contract clause reopened, you are doing that entirely on your own." Finn stayed totally silent for a moment, then gave one nod. "I appreciate the honesty." He calmly went up 1 floor, asking to speak with Astrid Whitmore. Her assistant gave him 2 minutes. Finn took every second. Standing across from her desk, he dropped his folder and explained the risky clause in 4 precise sentences. Astrid just sat there listening, her chin raised high, fingers bridged. Underestimating him, she flipped 2 pages and snapped his folder shut. Legal signed off. She dismissed him. I believe that change followed legal's complete review. I can show you the document history. You can just send it to my email. I will review it after the morning briefing. Finn desperately wanted to say more. But the quiet man did not. He thanked her politely and walked out. Clinton gave a patronizing nod, making the classic mistake of assuming the quietest guy was simply backing down. Finn ignored the arrogant nod completely. Returning to his desk, he drafted a calm email, attaching the history and his financial disaster model. He sent it to Astrid, Leon, and a hidden corporate list that reached all the way to the chairman. By 9:30 a.m., Clinton demanded an urgent internal corporate review. On paper, they called it a final alignment meeting. But we know it was a stage. Finn got invited 15 minutes late. By then, the senior executives were already settled in, sipping their freshly poured coffee. He walked in quietly with his folder, watching the arrogant CEO take the head of the table. Clinton sat on her right. Leon slumped 2 seats down, staring hard at the wooden table grain. The quiet father took the empty chair at the very end. Clinton kicked things off with a totally rehearsed corporate line. "We have a slight gap in the operational confirmation chain regarding this deal. This morning's addendum caused a minor misunderstanding down at the execution level. I want this resolved before noon." Notice how he never named Finn. He really didn't have to. Clinton used his pauses like a surgeon uses tools, dropping silence exactly where it would cut the deepest. Finn just asked to speak, laying out the timeline without any drama. He mentioned flagging the risky clause back on Thursday. He had demanded written confirmation before they made a single revision. Leon had seen the note, but nobody bothered to reply with actual details. The contract language sitting before the partners was completely different from what the operations team actually reviewed. The quietest man there never even raised his voice once. Across the table, Leon refused to look up while Astrid silently heard him out. Then the CEO straightened a paper, speaking in that smooth, arrogant tone she always used to crush dissent in boardrooms, exactly like this. "Caution certainly has its place. A deal we spent 14 months structuring cannot be stalled by some worst-case scenario that may never even happen. You operations people are just wired to obsess over what might go wrong. You and I know leaders only focus on crossing the finish line." It was the type of line that sounded great in a boardroom, but terrible on a human conscience. Finn just absorbed it all. He stayed totally silent. He knew he couldn't change corporate culture today. He just needed to fix that one risky contract clause. But Astrid wasn't finished. She never glanced toward the waiting room, though she really didn't have to. I also want to add, she said, that when personal issues show up on a big signing day, sometimes the employees dealing with them aren't equipped to properly evaluate risk and pressure. That is something we all need to be mindful of. Not one person mentioned his little girl sitting outside. They didn't have to. A quiet anger burned the back of Finn's neck, but his face remained a blank, calm wall. He listened to the soft, sharp click of a nearby office door shutting tight. He completely ignored her nasty comment about his personal life. He refused to let them play his daughter like a pawn on a chessboard. He quietly replied, "I will be ready for technical support during the partner meeting if you need me." Astrid gave a single nod. The executives moved on, completely ignoring his massive financial warning. Walking out, a senior manager actively avoided making eye contact. Another executive, an older finance manager who had known him for 2 years, grabbed his arm near the door and whispered, "Send me the document's version history." He fired off the file before even taking his seat. "You and I both know how this works." The company quickly started punishing him with polite, procedural corporate silence. Suddenly, his access to 2 main network folders was permanently revoked. His security badge let out a harsh, angry beep when he attempted to enter the main executive hallway, forcing the front desk receptionist to buzz him inside. Back at his computer, an email sat waiting from Human Resources demanding a mandatory routine documentation review for the next morning, completely missing an agenda. People who just waved at him earlier were now suddenly staring at their phones as he walked past. But he never panicked. He simply walked to the lounge. His daughter was right there, legs swinging happily, sketching an ocean with a tiny boat on the waves. She held the artwork up with pure pride when he entered. He sat quietly beside her for 4 minutes. He watched her sketch a tiny man wearing a tie on the deck and asked softly, "Is that me?" She nodded back. He raised the paper up to the window, swearing it was the greatest boat ever drawn. Right as he got up, she stared at him and asked, "Daddy, why did your badge make that funny noise?" "The machine is acting up today," he said, fixing her small sweater at the shoulder. "Nothing to worry about." He kissed her forehead and marched straight back to his desk. Back in his chair, he checked his personal email on his cell phone. A calendar reminder flashed bright. His daughter's specialist visit next Tuesday, already delayed twice before. A pharmacy alert popped up, then rent, automatic payments scheduled to hit on Friday. He stared at the screen, feeling the crushing weight of a single father's month. One career misstep here could bring his entire quiet life crashing down around him. Then he flipped his laptop open. He quickly downloaded every single file from that morning straight onto a hidden flash drive. He attached a simple cover sheet detailing those massive financial exposure risks. He typed up a brief secondary memo for the board chairman. It was highly respectful, yet brutally honest. But he didn't hit send just yet. You and I know they underestimated him. He left the click away, ready to drop the hammer if they pushed him too far. He just quietly went down to the lounge. Picture the guy they all ignore. He sat beside Callista, silently eating a granola bar while she drew them standing in a garden. Without even lifting her pencil, she asked, "Did you do something wrong, Dad?" He paused, making absolutely sure his voice was steady before he even answered. "Not everyone who gets told they are wrong actually is," he told her. "Sometimes it takes a little while for other people to see what is really there." She quietly chewed on that. "Like when I spelled my name right, but the substitute teacher said it was wrong." "Exactly." She nodded, accepted it, and went right back to drawing her garden. Upstairs, the high-stakes partner meeting kicked off at 11:58. The boardroom reeked of fresh coffee, expensive wool, and pure, nervous ambition. The 4 overseas delegates marched in together, shaking hands with Astrid at a slow, deliberate pace that made it clear seniority still ruled their world. George Whitmore dialed in via video link from a remote off-site. His massive face dominated a screen at the far end of the room. He didn't say hello to his daughter, he greeted the CEO. Astrid launched a flawlessly controlled presentation. She wanted everyone to know exactly why she sat in the big chair. She projected confidence, detailing expanded shipping lanes and long-term commitments. She highlighted operational resilience and the sheer power of the merged fleet. She shot back answers without glancing at her notes. No mere placeholder here. She was the apparent heir, demanding that every suit in the room recognize it. Meanwhile, Finn sat at the far edge by the controls. Nobody bothered announcing his title. He got it. After that morning's fallout, he knew he wouldn't sit anywhere near the center. He just quietly opened the shared slides and did his job in the shadows. Let's watch the illusion break. The partners started probing the operational details and cracks showed. A delegate pressed her on the winter buffer for that northern shipping lane. Astrid confidently said 9 days, but with the new schedules, the true number was 11. The quiet man scribbled the correction on a legal pad and quickly tore it off. He slid it across the table, pacing it perfectly so nobody else would notice. Astrid's eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second. She looked up, smoothing it over. I want to revise that. Our confirmed buffer is actually 11 days, factoring in the updated ice windows. She spun it as if she'd caught the oversight entirely on her own. Another suit challenged her on the priority protocols during major coastal storms. Astrid gave a slick summary, completely missing a massive contractual carve-out. Finn jotted down another lifeline. She quickly read it. She seamlessly wove his save into her next sentence. Clinton's jaw clenched hard. Leon, 2 seats down, just hovered his pen over his notepad, sensing the shift. The whole delegation slowly realized the silent guy by the wall was running the show. Astrid felt it happening, too. She burned with that sharp, resentful anger you get when you're saved by the exact person you swore you did not need at all. This wasn't gratitude. To her it felt like a heavy debt, and she absolutely despised debts. Stick with me here. The senior delegate, a man with silver hair, flipped a crisp page in his binder and loudly cleared his throat. I want to return to the addendum on multi-port disruption, he announced. In the draft we reviewed last night, the loss-sharing structure was altered. Can you explain how your team calculated the financial impact if 2 or more key ports shut down at the exact same time during a strike or bad weather? You know that heavy silence in a boardroom? We all felt it right then. Astrid gave her perfectly polished, rehearsed corporate answer. She claimed we adopted a looser liability structure just to guarantee speed and mutual trust. She confidently threw that word around 4 times. She completely ignored the risk cascade. She didn't even have to openly lie. Her corporate double talk conveniently skipped over the massive financial cliff we were standing on. The delegate just listened, no nodding, flipped a page and waited. I watched Finn stare at his laptop screen. Finn glanced at the empty corner of his notepad, where his warnings to Astrid once sat. He pictured his daughter Callista downstairs. Just her sketchpad, some juice, and a stuffed rabbit. He thought about the asthma inhaler in her bag, and that delayed doctor appointment. He remembered Leon's voice from earlier, completely dead with exhaustion. If you plan to reopen this deal, you are completely on your own. The buyer sat there, just waiting for someone at our table to actually be honest. Finn finally looked up. If I may, he said, staying seated. His tone cut through the silence. The quietest guy always shifts the room's gravity. This new addendum completely changes the operational structure we reviewed 2 weeks ago. In the exact scenario you mentioned, the updated terms push a massive unfair amount of financial loss onto us. I think everyone here needs to see this discrepancy before we sign another single page. Astrid slowly turned to face him. For a second, our fearless CEO looked like 10 years of executive training had totally failed her. She simply did not know how to handle the quiet, unshakable authority Finn was bringing. His voice wasn't aggressive or sorry. It was purely factual. It sounded exactly like a man who had 0 to prove and 0 to hide. She chose pure power. She leaned back, flashed that signature CEO smile that usually crushed her opponents, and said, "Try me again." "I dare you," she didn't shout. It was ice cold and deadly quiet. She really thought she still owned that room. Big mistake. Finn stared back for 2 seconds. No anger in his eyes, no joy either. The quiet guy was just done waiting. "I do not need to try you again," he replied. "I just need to show everyone this error." He looked straight at the buyer. "May I have 60 seconds to share a document?" The buyer gave one slow nod. Finn calmly plugged his laptop into the projector. Our corporate logo flashed up, quickly replaced by a very clean date-stamped project timeline. What happened next took less than 10 minutes. Stick with me here, because those 10 minutes completely shattered the power dynamic. First, he pulled up a warning memo he sent Thursday to legal and business operations. It clearly flagged the port risk and demanded a written answer. He showed Leon's two-word reply. Next came the file data, proving a senior executive secretly changed the terms at 10:52 last night. He put the original language right next to the brand new contract terms. Highlighted in plain English. You and I could easily spot the $700 million trap. Finally, he ran the risk model against 3 scenarios: a major port strike, a massive coastal storm, and a global shipping container shortage. The quiet ones do their homework. He used their exact historical corporate filings. The total hidden exposure under that revised contract language. You and I can do the math. If 2 scenarios overlapped, the cost easily topped $700 million. Silence hit the arrogant room. Leon just went the color of old paper. Clinton tried hiding his panic, but a nervous sweat broke out right above his collar. The loudest partners frantically checked their binders, pen tips trembling straight down the margins. On the main display, the camera caught CEO George Whitmore suddenly leaning forward in total shock. When his voice hit the speaker, it was completely quiet and crystal clear. Stop the deal. The quiet man opened one last file. It was a brief internal memo he dug up in the corporate system, buried as a bullet point inside a massive strategy document. It dismissed the operations team's valid warnings about the addendum using this exact arrogant phrase. Risk-averse thinking that must not be allowed to slow a defining financial deal. The memo's author was a name every single executive at that table instantly recognized. Clinton froze completely. He refused to look at Astrid, staring straight down at the carpet instead. Astrid barely breathed. The quiet single father had not made a fool of her today. He showed her, calmly and without ego, that her loud team had manipulated her entirely. But she knew that difference only mattered if she finally took a real stand now. Right then, the heavy conference room door clicked open with a very soft sound. No one sent for little Callista. She had simply waited in silence long enough. She stood there in a blue cardigan and sneakers, clutching a stuffed rabbit tight to her chest. Her hair was slightly flattened on one side from the waiting room lounge chair. She nervously scanned the massive boardroom, full of intimidating adults she did not know. Then her eyes locked onto her quiet father, and all the nervous tension left her tiny shoulders at once. "Daddy," she asked, "can we go home? I am so hungry." You and I know tension. No one spoke. The senior delegate's pen just hovered silently. One arrogant executive carefully set his water glass down without making a single sound. The live video feed captured George Whitmore taking a very slow, deeply humbled breath. The quiet man did not stand immediately. He simply looked at his daughter with the exact same quiet steadiness he gave the contract. For a brief moment, the sheer crushing weight of that morning, the locked boardroom doors, the denied badge access, the locked files, that silent warning email from human resources, the long, punishing silence designed to make the quietest man feel incredibly small, every single bit of it was visibly worn on his face. He didn't have to explain a thing. Every loud executive in there finally understood. Astrid stood up. She grew up navigating these ruthless corporate boardrooms. She was always taught that strong leaders never apologize in front of powerful business partners. You and I know true leadership. She decided instantly those loud rules were completely wrong. She walked around the massive table, her heels steady on the carpet, stopping a very respectful distance from the quiet man's daughter. She did not touch the small child. She looked straight at Finn. "Mr. Corbin is absolutely right," she announced, her voice booming clearly across the live video feed. He raised his valid concerns Thursday through the proper official channels. Those valid concerns were simply not answered in good faith. The contract addendum was altered last night under a toxic pressure I allowed in this building. Our internal review today blindly reached the absolute wrong conclusion about the completely wrong person. And I foolishly let it happen. If this deal had been signed today, this company and our partners would face a disastrous financial position none of us could accept. Watch this. She just barely shifted her face toward the screen. "Chairman, I request we suspend this signing until the original clause is back, and we review who made that overnight edit. George Whitmore's face stayed completely frozen on the screen, then a single nod. Suspension approved. I expect a full corporate audit by tomorrow evening, Mr. Mercer. You are handing all your drafts and emails to internal counsel today. Mr. Hawthorne, you will fully cooperate. Acting Chief Executive, your signing power for this deal is paused until the audit finishes. The chairman softened briefly. Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Finn just gave a nod. The quietest guy in the room hadn't spoken since Callista walked in. He simply walked across the boardroom and knelt beside his little girl. Brushing a stray hair from her face, he whispered, "You were so good today." "So good, let's go get some lunch." "Okay," she replied. She held out her stuffed rabbit. He took it, tucking the toy right under his arm like he always did. He stood up, grabbed her hand, gave the stunned executives one nod, and left. The door shut right behind them with a very quiet click. Only then did the suffocating room finally begin to breathe. Over the next week, Whitmore Global moved with extreme, careful caution. The quiet analyst got his network access fully restored by evening. His security badge stopped acting up. Human Resources sent a fresh email, blaming the previous suspension on a procedural error, offering a very quick, formal apology. Coworkers who previously ignored him now visited his desk using flimsy little excuses. Finn stayed perfectly polite with everyone. He never once made his peers feel small. But he didn't make forgetting easy either. The arrogant Clinton Mercer was forced onto administrative leave during the audit. Within 10 days, the company announced his exit as some mutually agreed transition. Leon Hawthorne barely kept his job for the time being. But they shoved him out of corporate counsel, straight into a dead-end compliance role. The firm sent a brief internal memo about the whole mess, conveniently omitting Finn's name. But you and I know the executives realized exactly who saved them. That critical multiport clause was completely restored to its original version. The outside partners, who had been watching closely, finally agreed to sign. They included a message that their senior delegate insisted on delivering face-to-face. They moved forward because they saw how the firm survived a brutal crisis, rather than just cruising through the easy, profitable days. Late one evening, long after the floor emptied, Astrid found Finn. She wasn't wearing her power heels. She wore simple flats, a soft gray sweater, and had her hair tied back casually. She stood quietly right at the edge of his desk, waiting for him to notice. When the quiet man finally looked up, she didn't give a corporate speech, just 3 words. "I was wrong." Finn didn't reply right away. The silent guy didn't owe her any favors. At the same time, he didn't want to make the apology harder than necessary either. He slowly put his pen down. "I was wrong about the financial clause," she admitted. "I was wrong about the review. I was wrong about how I talked down to you, and wrong for attacking your daughter being here inside the office building. I used her to make you look smaller. That was a terrible mistake and never should have happened." She took a very slow, steady breath. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness today. I'm just proving I finally learned the difference between what I did and what you and I know I should have done." He let that boardroom silence settle for a moment. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "It matters." Then he added carefully, "The thing I almost lost this week was not my pride. It was health insurance, rent, a specialist appointment, and a daughter who already knows what it feels like to wait. I want you to understand that before we go any further." The CEO nodded. She finally understood. 10 days later, they offered him Senior Operations Director, handing the quiet guy his own executive team. A seat at the high-stakes table, plus a salary bump that made his monthly bills much less cruel. The HR lead asked him, mostly as a corporate formality, what questions he had about the compensation package. He only had one. "Does this role allow me flexibility when my daughter is sick?" The lead paused, not the typical executive question she expected. "Yes," she said. "Yes, it does." He thought it over for 2 days and then he accepted the offer. Flash forward to a Friday evening a few weeks later. CEO Astrid Whitmore happened to be standing in the lobby when Finn came down from his new floor, Callista beside him. The little girl was rambling about a messy drawing she had made of a house with way too many windows. He was laughing softly. Neither of them noticed the powerful CEO at first. Alone between strategy meetings, standing near the tall glass windows, Astrid froze and simply did not step forward. She just watched. "You and I often think like her, Believing true power means making an entire boardroom fall silent when you speak. But over these past few weeks, she had finally learned that real power is sometimes having the patience to stay quiet long enough for the hard truth to stand on its own, and then speaking at exactly the right moment. Not to stroke some executive ego, but purely for the sake of what actually needed protecting. Finn spotted her right near the exit. He lifted a hand, barely a wave, and she slowly lifted hers in return. Callista looked up at him, entirely curious. "Who is that, Dad?" "Someone I work with," he said. "Is she nice?" He seriously considered it. "She is trying to be," he said. "That effort actually counts for something." Together, they walked right out into the late afternoon light. Astrid watched the quiet man leave until they reached their car, then turned back toward the elevators. The click of her heels sounded much softer than that morning. She had snapped 5 icy words at the quietest guy sitting at the far end of her conference room. She still did not know exactly what kind of business leader she would become. But she knew she had met a real one on a day that almost ended in financial disaster for everyone. And she had learned from him that the absolute strongest voice in any boardroom isn't always the one that speaks first or screams the loudest. Sometimes, as you and I now see, it's just the one telling the truth at exactly the right time, while a small child waits patiently on the other side of the glass.